Silver Society.
Welcome to the Silver Eye Society podcast, the podcast where we look at films to find the ancient themes behind our modern issues. I'm in a modern issue today, don't you think? I'm in New York City, so you may hear lots of sounds, may hear some cats making their voices heard on the pod, may hear some extremely loud neighbors. We got our friendly local homeless individuals collecting garbage. It's a beautiful freezing day. It's a great time to be in the big city as there's going to be some removal of the mandates naturally the day after I leave. And I go back to LA. They're not removing anything. So I love to.
They call it the Big Apple. Did you know that?
I don't call it the Big Apple because that's.
Did you know they call it the Big Apple? Just so you knew.
Did the Alexa or some shit just come on behind me?
I don't know. Don't worry about it. What's going on here? What movie are we doing?
All right.
Yeah.
So we're talking about The Social Dilemma, which is not a movie. It's a documentary. And as fans and supporters and members of the Silver Eye Society know, we cover anything indiscriminately, including documentaries. This is not my favorite documentary, though it is one of my favorite subjects. The Social Dilemma is all about social media and how it's ruining our lives, ruining our society, ruining everything. So we're going to talk about a few of the things that are being ruined and if those things are actually being ruined. For instance, disagreement. So one of the main points in this movie is that no one can agree on anything anymore and truth is entirely relative. But we're going to talk about whether that's actually new or it's just something we are realizing now. We're also going to talk about our favorite subject on the Silver Eye Society podcast. What are those experts up to? In The Social Dilemma, we got a lot of experts talking about centralizing truth. So I'm going to talk about what that means and why they should even be toying around with truth. And to sum it up, we'll talk about whether tech people are really the people that should be trying to find a solution to the tech problems that they created, because maybe they'll just create more problems. So we got a dilemma here. This episode has many dilemmas to delve into. So shall we start?
With what?
The word of the podcast.
You know, I just made an extremely fast move on the word of the podcast. I had a different word, and I just realized I'm going to change it. I'm going to change it to dilemma, a noun. I haven't reviewed this. This is off the cuff. 1520s in rhetoric, from the late Latin dilemma, from the Greek dilemma, double proposition. A form of argument in which it is shown that whoever maintains a certain proposition must accept one or other of two alternative conclusions, and that each of these involves the denial of the proposition in question. Loosely, the choice between two undesirable alternatives. That's what I wanted to get to.
Yeah.
We all know what a dilemma is. The horns of a dilemma. Sometimes that's an analogy that's made.
Oh.
Because there's two.
Yeah.
D-I, two. There's a special bonus episode for Word of the Podcast, or bonus Word of the Podcast. It's a trilemma. What's all that about?
That's a thing?
Never heard of it, but apparently
If there's such a thing as a trilemma, we're living through it.
The social trilemma is my
That's the name of the podcast episode.
The social trilemma. Anyway, so that's that. It was going to be concordance. I was going to talk about concordances, but maybe on maybe for the second part of this episode.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get rolling. What do you want to talk about with dilemmas? What's the deal here? What do you ascertain from the etymology of dilemma, and how can that help us dealing with what is the dilemma? what is the social dilemma? Do they even tell us in the movie? They don't, right? They start out, they're like, what's the
No.
problem? And everybody's like that's the whole intro of the movie is all these tech geniuses being like, what is the problem?
Yeah, I think it's just the idea of you got this thing, social media, and they're like, we invented this. All these people invented it. And then I guess the dilemma is the world before this invention and the world after it. And then maybe the trilemma in their mind is going to be, they're going to fix everything that they fucked up in the first place. But I hate this. I hate this fucking documentary. Enough. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. It's like, why do you... Okay, I kind of understand. Like, if you have a group of people that fuck something up, sometimes you want to ask them how to fix it. This was the whole idea behind the banking crisis of 2008 and the financial meltdown. Everyone was like, oh, the banks fucked everything up, but let's let them solve it because they're the experts. And there is some truth to that, and it makes sense to a degree. But I have a real... First off, I don't like any of these people. I don't like them. I don't like them. Does anyone like these types of people?
I like only one. The guy with the dreads, Jaron, whatever his name is. The guy that's like a tech. He's the other side of the tech overlord that we could have had. Instead, we got like apathetic, early version humanoid robot billionaire Mark Zuckerberg. We could have had this like also socially devoid of normalcy, but like in a fun kind of loosey-goosey way tech overlord. Like we had two paths, and we took a choice. I don't think we had a choice. That's all of these things come down to, is that all of your choices are being removed and you're just being funneled around through algorithms and cyber mazes to become a worse person and a better product for someone else. But I like Jaron, okay? I like his vibe. I like his whole little Lucy thing. He's whimsical.
Yeah, and I understand that, and he's a real cyber hippie or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I like him. I would hang out with him more than I would some of the other people,
Yeah,
I guess,
for sure.
if I wanted to buy drugs or whatever.
Yeah.
But and he's not a stupid person. He's actually smart. I've watched him for several years talk about certain things.
Yeah.
I still, with respect, don't want him in control of things.
Yeah.
And maybe he would say, I don't want to be,
That's why we like
a very early thing from years ago, watching him, he was doing an interview. He was not wearing shoes because,
Bless.
and I get it. It's fine. And he was saying that the big switch, which they don't talk about this too much in this doc. I've already forgotten a lot of what they talk about because it's just this gray, it's like hyper new corporate language that just oozes over you, and you're like, you can't even remember what was just said because no one says anything. They don't make definitive statements.
Yeah.
They don't have. It's just this kind of hazy, like, there's some problems and we're gonna fix them somehow, even though we made them, and it's just.
That's
but
what
anyway.
I don't like, though, with the documentary is I had the same problem with you, is that, look, these are the kind of documentaries that turned me off to documentaries for a while, and they're these, like, Netflix, whatever, documentaries that get churned out, and they have, like, the good graphics, and I noticed, I was like, this documentary is kind of designed like an addictive app, because they will cut out of doing the video of the person speaking, and then just overlay text on the movie while the person is speaking. So they're constantly switching what you're looking at. So your fucking smartphone riddled brain can still keep up with it and pay attention and be interested in it. And I don't like that because I know what they're doing, you know, and I'm like, it's okay. You can leave the person's face. I won't like start to stare at the ceiling and drool just because there's been a person speaking in the same frame for more than a minute. So there's a lot of that like sleek kind of like design. And, you know, we gotta say this part. They like to go hard on the whole fake news bit and like, oh, the young teenage boy became a radical or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but that's not even actually the real problem. Like if I, you know, may be so bold, I think the real problem is that millions and millions of people are having their average existence mildly degraded, as opposed to a minority of people who are joining the fringe, whatever, extremists. Like that's not like, those people are going to do that anyway. Okay. So there's that. But also I'm more concerned about the drop in quality of life and in cognitive ability for massive amounts of people. Not like one teenager that's like, I'm going to go to a protest for, you know, against the frogs turning gay or something. Like, that's not, let him go. Let him go.
But he just, I mean, beyond that, he just kind of stumbled like a zombie into a park or something in the movie, stood there looking at things, then got arrested. And then his sister shows up and accidentally bumps into a cop who immediately arrests her. Like, are these the danger? Is this the dangerous extremists you're worried about? These are fucking zombies. Like, what is going on? Like, is this scary to you? That guy's scary to you? He's the danger? Okay, that's not a danger. That's not a danger. That's someone who like stumbled as if they were like they're on like a bunch of drugs to keep them from being depressed. They stumble into a park and then fall over.
Yeah,
so
maybe
if that's
the
threat, then
is that they got
okay,
arrested for stumbling is maybe the actual problem we should look into there. But
so that part of the movie is this whole thing where they make up the family and all that. That's a choice they made, and which I reject, but fine. They did that to tell a story. It's stupid, but fine. And then the other thing that's interesting about the fake news angle, briefly, one image. Look at one. See, this came out right at the very beginning of the pandemic. Okay? Now, they do a really quick slideshow of like fake news things, right? And if you look, one of them is of people that have made masks for themselves, like out of milk jugs or something, like these masks. And I think the implication is that this is foolish, that there are masks that are being made or whatever. Look how it's fake news. Like, it's so funny. You have to, because this is right at that beginning where, if you remember, the story about the pandemic was like, it's all good. Go to Chinatown and like have dinner and stuff. It's not real. So no, seriously. I mean, like,
it's true. Yeah.
I understand fake news is real. People lie. It's propaganda and all kinds of things. And you're going to see a lot more of it coming up. But also, things change. And that's not fake news. Sometimes things just change. And to give credit to... There's a portion of the right now who gets confused and upset about stuff. And they say things like, the science changed. And it's like, well, yeah, sometimes the science does change. That's not what you're at. Like, that's normal. It's okay to not know something and then figure out later.
Yeah, and
it's
update
different,
your beliefs,
especially
like,
with
obviously.
Right. I think they get upset. Everybody gets upset right now, and understandably so, about how the rhetoric, the media, the message changes alongside that, and it feels like whiplash a lot of times. That was most shown up with the mask debate from the very beginning of it, with the,
all of that stuff.
Rehash that, but
the problem with that is that, and this is not something that's discussed, is we're gonna get into this, right? Because here's the thing: one of the issues that this movie talks about is no one agrees on anything anymore, because there's all these different echo chambers that you can enter into, and all these different sources of information and misinformation, and so no one can agree on the basic facts anymore. And if no one can agree on the basic facts, then we can't move forward and progress as a society. Okay, that's the premise. The premise is essentially that social media is creating these divisions in worldview. That if there were not social media, or if somehow social media was different, that people would have more unified worldviews. That's a premise, that's a hypothesis, and it's one that both of us take issue with to a degree. Now, I would grant that, of course, things are more divided. I think that's true. I don't think that it's necessarily all to blame on social media, and I don't think that you could get rid of it if you just poofed social media away tomorrow. Part of the problem with that is that not so much that people are getting misinformation. This has always been a bogus, like, elite concern trolling type of device to be able to push people in the direction of clamoring for centralized truth and a controlled media landscape. It is a ruse. It is a scam. Now, what I think is more interesting to talk about is whether social media has just made it obvious that everything we once took for granted as true, as, well, I believe this, and I'm going to assume that other people all believe that, because I do think that there's a certain, it's not a logical fallacy, but it's kind of like a human brain thing, that people assume a lot of other people think something that they do, or they think people believe something en masse when that's not actually the case. It's kind of this weird projection. And so I feel like I'm not convinced that it's necessarily even a problem that people disagree with each other so much. I think that if we really want to live in the information age, we need to grow the fuck up. Is one of the main problems here, is that you have always been having access to many different worldviews. That information has always existed. There's always been conflicting information. It's just never been so readily available to so many people. And it's never been so easy to spot the fact that the arbiters of truth and the legacy media and things like this that we once believed were why we had a unified worldview, we now see that they are often wrong, flawed, and even malicious. So these are many problems that are getting tied together as if they are just one thing. And it's like, oh, it's because social media is allowing like teenagers to look at misinformation, and that's why we're not unified. What are you talking about? Teenagers have never agreed with their parents on anything. Like that's normal, first of all. Whether they get it through social media or wherever they're getting it, that's like teenage rebellion and being like, no, I reject all the beliefs of society. Like, that's always been the thing. So I'm not sure about this framing that it's like a panic emergency that the teenager in this documentary has like fringe beliefs or something. So what do you think about that? Because you also saw the same thing that I did, which is like this framing of cultural disagreement as the problem. And that is something that we need to actually talk about first, because we need to make sure that we're properly identifying the problem before we try to solve it. Thank you, if that's okay with the experts.
Of course, there's disagreement amongst people. I would hope that's the case. There's different beliefs in, say, this country. People have very different beliefs. Some people are very conservative Christians. Some people are the opposite of that. Go down the line. There's all kinds of different beliefs, and we've had them for a long time. Before, like you just said, you couldn't see them as clearly, and you also couldn't react to them as clearly. So you couldn't go see somebody you disagree with and put a little thumbs down or whatever. So this is all just a game. That doesn't matter. My concern is that there is a kind of overarching, you call it kind of a technocracy. These people, these experts that have developed this technology in this particular field, who thinks they have a worldview, and this isn't conspiratorial. This is just simply that when you get a lot of people that are in the same areas, that work on the same things, that tend to have a lot of the same.
They have a culture.
Yeah, culture and understanding of the world. You know, the culture of Silicon Valley, which I just completely reject and have nothing but true disdain for. I like just visceral disdain for. But it's fine. They're human beings and do whatever they want. So I'm worried about them taking their kind of viewpoint and trying to make it the only viewpoint. That's what I'm
They're in
concerned
danger.
about.
They're in danger. This class of people, it sounds so bad, but it's like this group of people is quite dangerous. And it's funny because they're like, it makes sense in a way that it would be like the tech type of people that are the most threatening to a modern society, because they seem so non-threatening in a way, right? They have this like, they're living in California, they don't wear shoes, everything is rainbow and ping pong tables in the office, and oh, it's inclusive, and we like to eat keto and, you know, vegan, blah, blah, blah. All this stuff that seems on the outside to be very casual and friendly and laid back, but at the same time there's this underlying ethos of enforced willful utopianism. It's this kind of outlook that if we do, we can create utopia. That's fucking scary shit, because that's actually also the same mindset that you get from a lot of like historic dictator types, which is I can design my way into the perfect society. That's the same ethos. It's the same ethos. Now, I'm not saying that they're dictators or anything like that. Obviously, you know, like there's difference here. But the point is that when you get that kind of hubris, that kind of coupling of a desire to like really mold the world for better, and the ability to do so, and a kind of seduction that one has with their own utopianistic, idealistic worldview, you can go down a dark path constantly just believing, well, if we just fix one more thing, if we just change this one more thing, we'll get there, we'll make it better, we can make it better. And it's like there is a point at which you just keep making things worse and you have to actually turn back or change course. This is not the kind of mindset that you see in the Silicon Valley tech type of person. They're really into like this engineering a life, engineering literally, and engineering like society, social engineering. It's what is done with these apps also. It's like partially the actual technical engineering of the app, but then also the engineering of the behavior of the people that use the app. This is pretty fucking serious stuff, you know? That's why I really take a lot of a harsh view of this kind of idealistic outlook that these tech people have. And so okay, so let's go back right to the point.
So also keep in mind that one of the people in this documentary they feature is Steve Jobs briefly, right? Because Steve Jobs is kind of this, you know, in their pantheon of tech gods or whatever, he's one of the older ones, right? And I just like to, this is amazing to me. This is a quote they put in the movie from Steve Jobs while he's talking in order, I guess, to show how brilliant he is. And I'd like to read this quote to you, if you don't mind. Computers, the most remarkable tool we ever came up with, the equivalent of a bicycle for the mind. So that's the tech genius Steve Jobs. And that's the quote they decided to put in this documentary to show what a genius he was, that computers are the bicycle of the minds.
And shoes are the spoons of the feet.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much. That's the reason that I don't get too concerned. I don't worry too much about the tech oligarchy enforcing utopia on anyone, because they made a basic mistake, which is that in general, my guess is on average, they are probably smarter on average than most people, on average. But these people fall into the same traps that everyone does. Like and I remember this, you know, when the iPhone came out, this very like weird worship of the idea
Apple,
of Steve
yeah.
Jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and partially I think because he died. It's always easier
Yeah,
to make
that
a
helps.
god of someone that dies. But you know, that's why I'm not particularly worried about the threat of all these geniuses, because you know, they're very. Now there is this problem, like you said, and it's important. It is a very much an engineering mindset. And you see this in the types of fads that come out of there, like the keto diet and all these kinds of. The thing I hate the most,
Intermittent
I'm probably
fasting,
maybe
the weird sleeping stuff, like Buckminster
productivity.
Fuller did that. We talked about that. Yeah, that kind of
productivity apps and productivity mindset and all this kind of
Biohacking.
stuff.
Yeah.
Right, and I'm not saying there isn't some. Look,
No, it's
all
just
these
it's just
things, I'm not-
indicative of the mindset of this idea that like you
Right.
can engineer yourself into this better state. And it's like maybe sometimes, but like be careful, you know, because also Steve Jobs died, right? Because didn't he like not take medicine or something? Because he was like, I'll just eat
I don't know.
fruit and it'll cure
Sounds like
cancer. I don't know. It's
misinformation.
probably his misinformation. It's okay. He's dead. He can't be killed by misinformation anymore. Now let's talk though, because one of the problem that we're trying to get out here is like, are we in danger of identifying disagreement, which is ultimately dissent is a flavor of disagreement? Are we in danger of identifying disagreement as a problem that needs to be engineered out? Because that's one of the premises of this movie, is that we're so fractured in the way we view the world. This is a problem. We need to solve it. Are you trying to solve it by getting rid of disagreement? Or are you trying
So
to
they're
solve
not.
it? You know, like, would we go the right way about this and say we need to evolve as a species to understand how to navigate disagreement and all that?
I don't think that, I don't even think. I think that's one aspect of this movie, but I'm not
It's
even
one.
sure that was the main thrust
No,
of
it's
it.
just no,
That-
it's
that
not at
we
all.
have
Of
to-
course not. It's not the main thrust of it. That's the problem. That's why we brought it up, because both of us saw this big assumption being made. That's like, oh, look at this problem. Everybody doesn't have the same worldview, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute now. Why are we framing that as a problem? Like they gloss over that part. That's not, you know, something that they bring up too much.
Right. And I think it's partially because some of them, you know, and correctly so, don't believe in it. So recently there was a podcast with Mark Zuckerberg and Lex Friedman, and I tried to watch it. And I got through most of it. But
Wow.
and he says, you know, like and he takes a very kind of tries to stand back and says, they're okay with disagreement on the platform because there is a kind of American idea of people are allowed to have their opinion and all that kind of stuff. And in fact, probably out of most places in the world, we do better at this.
Yeah.
Plus is the other idea that disagreement actually fuels some of this. And, you know, I think that many of them would say, no, that's not the case, but I can't imagine. I don't know the answer. But, you know, there is this idea that disagreement is actually what fuels the people interacting with it, which is probably true because you react to something you disagree with
More so, yeah.
in a more visceral way, and you want to comment, and you want to, you know, I don't know. That's a theory, and I don't know the answer to that, but that's certainly a theory behind it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think that I think it's more like this. They're in a weird position also because of all this scrutiny from the government into their companies, because they're big companies. And there was one aspect of this which I thought that in that interview that I watched, that Mark Zuckerberg, I can't believe I'm taking up for him, but he actually made a good point. I think I accidentally called him Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg. He said, and he's correct, and this is just basically an observation about humanity in general, which is wise.
From Zuckerberg.
He said, you know, we're in a bad position because when we make a decision that pisses off, I'm going to paraphrase because he said it in a much more, that same kind of corporate-y, like, let me
Yeah.
dance around the point. When I make a decision that pisses off the left, basically what happens is half the country hates Facebook that day, right? And then or if I make a decision that pisses off the right, then half the country hates Facebook that day. But what happens is the emotion of hatred towards my company in that moment isn't balanced off by then say I make a decision that the left hates that day. It's not like the right then that same day says cheers in equal measure good job, Facebook. You did good on this one, and vice versa. So they piss off the right. It's not like the left cheers and says, great job. They just kind of say, well, they got that one right, and move on. And that is a dilemma for his company, and an understandable one. Like, and that's why eventually everyone just starts to hate these platforms, because the hate builds up on both sides whenever the decision is made. It's not like the other side then loves them in equal measure, which would make sense because you're bouncing back around constantly. But anyway, like I said, I don't use Facebook because who does that?
Yeah, I mean, well, you use Instagram, which is owned by Facebook, so...
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's owned by Meta, thank you. It's called Meta, don't call it Facebook.
Why did they do that?
You dead named them.
I did.
You dead named Facebook.
I'm doing hate speech against corporations. It's wrong. Okay, so... I kind of still feel like I want to talk about this thing about if social media is more exposing the fact that we've never gotten along, as opposed to creating all this new disagreement. Though I think it's both. I do think that we are more divided because of social media, because people's opinions are more apparent. Here's a weird idea I thought, and this is something I'd like you to see what you think. So I was in a cafe. And I thought about, like, because I was tweeting and I was like, I hope no one can see what I'm tweeting, because probably no one would around me in this like Williamsburg cafe, probably no one would be like, yeah. And then I thought about, what if there's a time or an application or something where you pull up your phone and it pulls up the social media accounts of all the people that are around you. So what if I could open my phone and look at like a GPS social media tracking app, and I could say, oh, let me see the social media of the girl that's sitting next to me. That would be very bad, because suddenly all these enemies and these kind of like harsh views that we put out online, that we definitely temper when we talk to people in person, suddenly they'd be with us in the real world in a way. And some people, I'm not going to say that everybody would immediately start fighting in the streets, but what if you opened up your thing and you're like one of these like pretty liberal or pretty not liberal people, and you see that the person sitting next to you has all these like pro-Trump tweets, or like pro putting vaccine anti-vaxxers in camps tweets, like, what if you're like, we're getting into a little bit like that social credit score system. That's akin to what that would be, which is you'd walk into the cafe and the barista would know that you posted fuck Pfizer, and she'd say, we don't serve your type here, which is already something that's been experimented with the vaccine cards, which is quite literally denying people service based on a new mandate, not even legislation. So I don't know. That's something I thought about.
Yeah, that's a really interesting idea. I'm thinking about it because I'm thinking about that. I think because at first I was like, yeah, that would be terrible. But then I started to think about it. You're in a cafe in Williamsburg. I've been to Williamsburg a few times in the past. And first off, in a place like that, the fact that there's even going to be any dissenting opinions around you is probably fairly unlikely. And you could say the same thing for,
dissenting
Amarillo,
from me?
Texas or something.
What do you mean?
I'm saying that it's unlikely, say, that you're going to have a significant amount of people like tweeting pro-Trump messages in a cafe in Williamsburg.
No, I'm the one. I'm the one. I'm not the...
I know.
I don't care. They're going to see my tweets and be like, oh, she didn't want to put she's against the mandates. Bad. I mean, that, I think actually more people are against mandates than vocalize. But, I don't know what it was I was tweeting. I was actually not tweeting something that bad, but I still was like, I don't want people to see. But what
I'm trying to say is that it would, number one, I don't think it would matter, because you'd really know. Finally, this would prove my point if someone made this. Number one, unless the company forced this function on you most people would simply not turn it on. So in
Yeah.
other words, you would have it turned off, right?
That's
Because
true.
you wouldn't want that. Now, what would be interesting is to see if they could trick people into wanting it.
Or
And I wonder about that, because then you could be like, you meet people who think the same way you do by
that's
doing
right.
that. But
you
but then
risk
you'd
also,
have-
yeah.
You do, but you know what? The reality is, and again, this has been my contention for a long time, is that, but this would really prove it if this got developed. Like, most people won't actually confront, like in physical space, confront someone on something. They really just don't. They don't do it. And that's why I think that I almost wonder if what would happen, I wonder if it would actually be really good for people. Because I wonder if then you would see the person across from you that disagrees with you, and you would realize they're not like,
It would humanize them.
the devil. They're not, so extreme or whatever. And then maybe you would talk. I wonder.
Well, it would add that 3D missing quality to social media, right? Because now what we have is you see pixels on a screen and you see only the limited character tweet, and you don't see the human. You just see like this 2D enemy that you oppose. If you were able to join that profile with the person sitting across from you in the cafe, suddenly that becomes a fully fledged person. And maybe it would have a reverse effect where you're able to humanize this person. You're like, oh, they're not like, some crazy looking aggressive person. They held the door open for me actually, or something like that. It would add back the human quality that social media lacks. Now, I still don't want it. And there's another element to that, which is like the more devious black hat tech kind of thing, where you're able to get that GPS information without people's knowledge, because people have GPS on their phone, and a lot of social media already does track your location. Like you see on my Instagram post, it says that I post it from Los Angeles or wherever I am. So now that's not very exact, but I believe they have the more exact information, because your GPS does, and your phone does track that for the most part, unless you go to lengths to make sure it doesn't. So there could be an app that allows you to get that information and connect it with social media profiles, and the person would have had to do extra work that they wouldn't normally do to opt out of it. That would be the dark side.
No, I just realized it didn't take me long to figure out the real dark side. So this is why this can't happen. I just realized why.
Oh God.
So here's what, I'm not gonna say what I would do. I'm saying if they were a bad actor. Okay, so what you would do is, let's say you wanted to take somebody out. This is what I immediately start to think of. What you would do is you would hack their profile, or you would get into their profile, and you would post something like obscenely. I'm not talking about the vaccine. I'm talking about something terrible.
Yeah, like actual hate
or
speech
illegal
or whatever
it is. Yeah, something really, really bad. And you would do it, and you would wait until you knew that person was in a crowded area of people that would be very much against it, so that you could basically target
start
somebody.
A mob.
You could.
Oh my God!
You could create a mob to target a particular
mobbing.
individual. Yeah.
Which is like, that's happened in the past, but in the
yeah, but you could do it in real time, and you could
you could
so
do it
that's
from afar.
why that can't exist. That cannot exist because you could easily you could do it anywhere in the world
exactly.
at any time. And in fact, well, there's all kinds of things you could do. You wouldn't even need it to be the real person. You could create a fake profile, but with the image of the person you want to take down. It's not even the real name, because it's not like anyone's going to check that. But anyway, this is the dark speculation, which I shouldn't go on to randomly. But I think that's why that can't ever happen. And then the second point about this is you're talking about location services, in essence, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't remember exactly when it was, but it used to be within my lifetime, for sure. Well, within my lifetime. I don't know. Check the date. So, all these satellites that are used to do this, to target your location, you realize it's being done by satellites, right? Mm-hmm. So I believe the military itself used to have, the reason you couldn't target down to 10 feet or so is because these satellites had been used or developed in order to use precision bombing. So in the first Gulf War, I'm talking about early 90s, this is kind of the advent of precision strike bombing with cruise missiles and kind of stuff. Well, guess what? How you did that? You used satellites in order to target, right? Now, if I recall, and you can look this up if you want, or so the audience can, it was maybe in the last 10 to 15 years when basically they released the prohibition on private companies using. They've always been able, not always, they've been able to do this for a long time to target a person down to within 10 yards or something like that. But it used to be 100 yards or some wider distance. The information was there, but you would not allow private companies to use it because of how it's a military weapon. The ability to target something within 10 yards is in essence a military weapon. Do you understand?
What are you saying? That corporations can track me within 10 yards?
Yeah, of course. Well, how do you think your GPS works when you turn it on your phone? It has to know exactly where your car is to tell you when to turn.
But that was just GPS. I didn't know it was like all of them. I don't know.
Do you know what GPS stands for?
Geography, geopolitical satellites.
Global positioning system, I think. It's called global positioning system, I think. Maybe it's misinformation. Yeah, the point is that, yeah, of course. How does someone know how to pick you up when you use Uber?
These are
you understand it's because they know
services.
Exactly where you're at.
Yeah, but I don't know because
right?
I feel like you're telling me that also Walmart knows when I'm home now. Like, I consent to GPS. I consent to Uber having my location because I know that that's what they need to do that. Are you telling me that like Target is checking when I get home? Like, do they know that I'm out and about? Like, what the fuck?
No, I don't know about that. I am telling you that a lot of settings on your phone and stuff are default listed depending on how you select them to show location services, and you have to actually go into the menus and turn. Right. So there's that. Right. There's that. But my wider point about all this was just something legal. That people. They don't even have to. No, it's how much has changed so quickly is what I'm getting at. Is I'm talking about when I was a kid, I watched the first Gulf War happen. It was cruise missiles, and it was like, wow, that's really weird. And this satellite system that allowed that to work is a military thing. And this goes into, I'm not sure if this is something we're going to talk about in our second episode or our first, which is now, but a lot of the technology or some of the technology that was developed for all of this was first developed for in the general sphere of military
or space. That's how that works, right? Is that like stuff is made for outer space, for space missions, or for the military, and then it trickles down to becoming like more everyday items.
In a general way, yeah. So there's something called DARPA, which is a big funding, I think, within the Defense Department.
Oh, this was your point. Like you had, what did you do? You said something like snarky. I think it was one of your notes. You were like, all of these tech people trying to make a utopian world, and they started out from DARPA, which is like a war department or something.
Right. Which, I'm looking at it right now. It was basically. I was really
like,
my notes are
misinformation. I don't
know. No.
No, it's true because DARPA made like the robots. You know, DARPA was the one that one of their first.
They don't make stuff. They give money to people to develop stuff.
Oh, whatever. That's okay, fine.
No, it's kind of important.
They gave money to someone. I think it was MIT or something that they developed these autonomous robots. But I think I can't remember. They were called like Boids. I think it was called Boids. I wrote about it in the newsletter. BOIDS, and it stands for something, but I don't know. But I like the word Boids. It sounds funny, but it does sound like something that would kill you though. And so the Boids were these. I think it was. I don't know if they made them in real life or it was just a imaging system. And Boids were programmed to move like a flock. So like they'd move in respect to each other in this really creepy bird-like way. And DARPA, brought to you by DARPA.
Well, I mean, hey, it's great. A lot of this
Yeah.
stuff is interesting technology, and they basically give out money. Now, here briefly on something that is, which by the way, I'm never going to let this go. I'm literally going to be talking about the pandemic for the rest of my life because I'm really pissed.
Yeah.
But this people can check for themselves, sources and all that stuff. But so speaking of DARPA, brief note. There's a guy named Peter Daszak, and he is the head of EcoHealth Alliance, and he received grants from the government in order to do experiments on coronaviruses in the Wuhan lab. By the way, he was also the person that we selected, that the Biden administration selected to send back to Wuhan to investigate. But that's really funny. So his organization, my understanding is, had made so all this stuff through like DARPA and all this, you make grant applications. Again, because this is why it's important. It's private people that are making applications for money in order to develop technology and experiments. My understanding is, and again, people should check this themselves to have their mind blown. Could be misinformation. There was a grant application from EcoHealth Alliance to, I think, DARPA that said, we want to develop, this is completely insane. I believe what it was is they wanted to use an aerosol mechanism. They wanted to develop a way of vaccinating bats against coronaviruses, but because you can't actually grab every bat and inject it with a little thing. They wanted to disperse the vaccine throughout the air, I guess in the caves, to try to vaccinate the bats against the coronavirus as an experiment to see if they could get bats to be immune to the coronavirus so that then the coronavirus couldn't go over to humans or whatever their idea was. Now look, DARPA is actually interesting, but according to these documents, supposedly, DARPA rejected this application because they're like, they didn't say that's insane and dangerous, but they're like, no, you can't just start spraying vaccines into the air to vaccinate bats against, that's insane. They rejected that application.
Well, that's
anyway.
safe. Leave the bats alone. God, what is it?
We gotta look. We live in a world. We're trying to solve problems. We're trying to make up technology. Some of the technology is great. It's good. It helps. Things. That's how it goes. But there is this thing. We talk about this a lot. This kind of mad scientisty lack of humility on the part of preeminent scientists.
What are you going to do? You're going to shoot vaccines, aerosol vaccines into the air? You think that's not going to have any negative potential outcomes? Like, who on God's earth has that much hubris?
It could be fine. It may be fine.
Or it could be really fucking bad. Like, the potential for... You can't contain that. Like, that's immediately as like my little, uneducated undergrad psychology major brain that doesn't work at, big brain CNN. Immediately I can say, that seems like an ethical quandary because it's basically impossible to contain that experiment. Like, you're going to shoot aerosol vaccines into the air en masse. A bunch of like, how many bats is in a cave? Like a gajillion of them. That's too many. I would also, if I was at DARPA, say, no, this is insane. I don't allow it. Yes, so this hubris, it's something that we come back to in this documentary because we have people that are pointing out these problems. And if you'll notice in the documentary, under their names, it's all like, I worked at Google. I worked at Facebook. I was CEO of whatever it is. So all these people actually came from the very organizations that they are saying are, causing the decline of society now. So it's like, aren't you kind of the problem? Maybe it's you. Maybe it's you, Maybe it's not like the tool. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's the tools that you keep making. How do we know that the next tool you make to save us from Facebook is not going to be worse? So, but it's fine. Let them, I guess. I don't know. I can't stop them.
I only
Lord
use
knows we
Pinterest.
can't.
That's my solution. I'm only on Pinterest now.
Pinterest
Follow
is
me on
probably-
Pinterest.
Pinterest
I don't
is
know how
probably
that
worse
works.
because it's like benign looking, so it probably like tracks you for sure. Pinterest is selling all your data to the CCP. Anyway, tech people don't deserve rights. I think that they should have them revoked, and we should aerosol vaccine them some humility. How about that for social engineering solution?
I'm always afraid of billionaires who don't just retire. Like corrupt billionaires. Can we just go back to the way it used to be where like
Yeah.
you were a railroad baron and you destroyed a bunch of land and you built and you made $1 billion and then you just went away to like Kennebunkport and built a little
Yeah.
mansion on the seaside and you stopped fucking with things? Could we go with that instead of like, hey, I made $1 billion creating
Yeah.
the thumbs up button on Facebook, which is completely
And now I'm going to
embarrassing
re-engineer
anyway.
society.
in terms of civilization. And then it's like, no, I'm not done. I want to do some more. Could you just like what? That's the scary people are the ones that they're driven. They're
Yeah.
driven by like their vision of the future.
Well, because it's not money, right? Like that's like make billionaires just purely greedy again. How about stop with
Yes.
the I'm a billionaire, but also I'm this like ethical, benevolent, like visionary. No, like just make a lot of money and go do money things. Do a lot of great cocaine. Do that. Stop trying to like make society better. It's not working. It's clearly not working. Like leave it to regular people. They're actually the ones that there's more of us. So we got it. It's fine. Like people work at McDonald's and look how great it works. Every time you go to McDonald's, you get your food. We don't need like DARPA boys, serving our fries to us or whatever crazy invention is going to come out next. I don't trust it. I think that we've had enough. I think we can have a democratic vote to send all the tech people to Silicon Island and they can, build their own insane utopia over there and leave everybody else out of their experimentation. Because that's the thing. They make these little jokes throughout the documentary like, you're the lab rat. I'm like, well, fuck you, man. You're the lab rat too, okay? But like, I didn't get to sign up, like I don't even, it's not my consent.
you
to be a
did
lab
sign
rat.
up though. That's your problem and everybody's problem. That's the
is.
only thing I have a problem with everyone bitching about is they're like,
That
I
is.
didn't sign up for this. I'm like, you did, motherfucker. You pressed accept. You didn't read it because no one reads.
Accept.
And
Final.
they change the terms every day. They send an email. Like, how many emails do I get? It's like Google's changing its service terms. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not reading this.
Yeah, I'm
They're
gonna read
delete
this
it
book.
immediately.
Yeah. Final
Right.
last
It's not
click.
real.
You're accepting terms and conditions. It's your final regret. So,
But
we're
our
actually
second
gonna-
episode, we're
Yeah, I
going
was
to
gonna
conclude this
say.
one. We're going to give some real strategies for fixing this, right?
Well, also we're going to talk about the lab rat rebellion, which is, so we're these lab rats. They laugh, they fucking laugh in the documentary. Like, we're the lab rats. You're the one that made the fucking maze, okay? So I'm a different tier of lab rat. I'm the proletarian lab rat. I'll turn on these guard lab rats. Like, don't be in here telling me, like, we nothing, okay? So in this next part for that we talk about the social dilemma, we'll talk about the lab rat rebellion. What is that? What do we do? What do we do? How do the lab rats rise up? Can they rise up? Because like you said, we all pressed accept on those terms and conditions without reading them every time they send a new one. So it's worth asking whether we even have the will to do what needs to be done and what that needs to be, because maybe here's a brilliant idea. Maybe it's not going to be a top-down solution for once. Maybe it's not going to be like some guy that doesn't wear shoes and wears the same shirt every day, figuring out how to solve the social issues that he is the one that created. Maybe it's up to the people, as I love to return to. So, in the meantime, what the people can do is join the Silver Eye Society. We will not social engineer you, and we do not have terms and conditions. You can just join and then see what happens. You'll like it. It's good. No regrets. Like, subscribe, all of that, and we'll see you in the next episode.